Hello and welcome to the Great White North, your destination for the iciest cold takes from the frozen wastelands of the north. I'm your host, Charles Constantine, and with me is NP. Say hello, NP.
Hello.
How's it going today?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty good. Just cooking. I cooked like 12 pounds of pulled pork.
That's a lot of pulled pork.
Yeah, so just had in a slow cooker all night. The trouble with making that much meat is by the time you're done playing with it, you don't even want to see it again. Never mind eat it.
Yeah, and like the whole house is just that smell. That's all you get.
Yeah, it smells like the deep south in here right now. Although I used some barbecue sauce my aunt made, so it came out pretty tasty. But
Homemade.
oh yeah.
It's a good way to go. Pork's the way to go, nice and cheap, and can max out for as long as you need.
I guess here's my cooking question for the audience. Leave a comment below if you know the answer. I saved the bone, like the ham bone, and I want to use it for soup, but after slow cooking it for 14 hours, is there any point? Or will all the vital juices be sapped out of it already? Couldn't tell you.
I'm not no expert cook. I'm not a big cook, but I think they're kind of done for that, at least from what I know. But I'm no expert. I suck at it.
I'd wager. Whatever. Pea soup is next. I'm gonna try and use it up. Anyway. Yeah. What did you get up to this week?
Let's hit this first topic.
Oh, okay.
I got up to nothing. I got up to nothing exciting at all. So don't worry about me. We'll hit this first topic here. This one has been popping around on my feed all over. And if you're in Canada, you definitely have heard about this. And this is this child player. How do you pronounce it? Got this Russian name, Provorov.
Provorov, yeah.
And Provorov, 26-year-old player, plays for the Flyers, Philadelphia Flyers. And the reason that this is in the news, and the reason you probably heard about this, and I was exposed to some terrible discussions in person around this particular event. And what happened was, I guess, there was this initiative for this team to wear a pride jersey for warm-up, not for the whole game, just for warm-up. And he refused, so they didn't let him warm up. And his refusal is because he's Russian Orthodox. And obviously, supporting pride, supporting gay marriage is not compatible with that religion, right?
Of course.
So in a society, you think in a society with freedom of religion, refusing to engage in something that is contrary to your beliefs is supposed to be accepted. But he was not allowed to play just in the warm-up, though. He did end up playing the game. He played his full game. He got 23 minutes in. It was like a lot of minutes for a professional player. But there was extreme amounts of outrage. I don't know. Did you see the outrage popping off this one?
No, I'm in my own echo chamber, so as usual, I only saw the reactions to the outrage.
Okay. So I saw some of this firsthand, and so he says, in his review, he says, "I respect everybody's choices, and my choice is to stay true to myself and my religion. That's all I have to say about it." And the coach says, "Yeah, like that's fine. You're true to your religion. You're supposed to, religious freedom, blah, blah, blah. Easy. It should be all there is to it. If we accept the norms of this system, the narratives of our, liberal democracy, this is supposed to be acceptable, But I saw this not only online, but firsthand. You had people losing their minds over this. How dare someone refuse to support this? I heard someone say this in person. I heard them say, "Oh, you respect everybody's choices, but you won't support something like that. Well, that's just your way of being a bigot." And I heard another person say, well, if you refuse to stand for this because of your religion, I bet your religion would let you to refuse to stand for mixed race marriage. What if a black and a woman were married?
Funny you mention
wouldn't
it.
support that. It's like it's obviously just the level of ignorance what the religious beliefs actually mean and why they are what they are. But it underlies, the real impetus behind this. This is an aspect of you could call it state religion, and this is what George Grant, when we reviewed his essay, Technology and Empire earlier, liberal democracy. They have a state religion, which is this notion of a liberal world, but this tolerance and acceptance has become an essential part of that religion. So this is sort of, this is heresy. Like this guy isn't just refusing to support against his beliefs. He's, refusing to partake in the religious aspect of this worldview, of this religion.
State enforced homosexuality.
It's really that. Now, I guess some nuance on that. It's not necessarily the state enforcing that directly, but it is the social paradigm that is putting the pressure on people with all this stuff.
Well,
no matter what.
Yeah. It's this confuses people so much because at least the face of the state in the United States is not it's not the originator of culture or policy. It's purely reactive, purely controlled. Like it's a second order effect, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, yeah, it's hard. You always think of things coming down from the state, and in an ideal world, I guess they would. But it goes to show the real state is the. Well, how much do you buy into the NRX concept of this distributed thing? Or how much, and then how much do you buy into sort of the shadow government deep state theory? What's our actual running theory of American state as it stands?
Well, I think we have a couple of different inlines to that from what we've read so far. So obviously, the Bain thing, way back when we did Joel Davis's what were called epistemic warfare,
mm-hmm.
and that dispensed the notion that there is just one explanatory factor. So you have obviously the economic determinism, and you have the notion of autarky, and then you have the liberal understanding, the pure democratic approach. So all these things, there's truths behind each one, but it's not obviously a single person dictating things, or even a single body.
So that's a point towards NRX, but
it's institution. There's it's institutions leveraging power against each other. A lot of this, right?
So,
but then we also have
this is just basic stuff, but it's important to go to. So I guess let's then understand the corporations, or different blocks of corporations, as separate institutions, but a form of institution. We'll call the Senate and Congress and all that a couple of institutions. We'll call, the deep state, like the CIA and the alphabet agencies, their institutions, etc. So it's not like it's the deep state running thing, like it's a singular actor or even singular institutional actor. But also, It's not like the government is the state, not alone, because there's all those other institutions. But then also it's not a purely distributed thing, because it is ultimately a group of elites that run these things. So it's a big smattering of all of the above, and that's not an easy answer to give.
Yeah. I think taking on that George Grant explanation of every state needs its religion, and because religion here doesn't have a connection to some tradition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being in the world that we live in. And then so all these institutions are kind of applying this religion of liberal democracy with that underpinning of tolerance and openness to everything. So all the institutions have to buy into that, I think. So they can't contradict any of this.
Mm-hmm.
If they say we have to be open to all of these degenerate behaviors, well, then, like the NHL is going to, it's not going to, fight back against other institutions in upholding that moral narrative, because that would be bad for it as an institution among these other institutions that are also
Right.
holding it.
Even though,
and then you could also even, and you can also tie in, going back even to what we talked about on Marcus's article, like the magic view of history, as well as the notions of these competing states using different technological controls. This particular approach, I think, of opening up access to more of these degenerate behaviors to monetize them, because that's a big aspect, I think, of this impetus, or the pride impetus, is monetizing homosexual lifestyles, right? Because it's a lot easier. At least from what I understand, there's some incentive to get more of that.
I'm not sure how much I buy the economic justification of the homosexual agenda. I feel like, I mean, it's plausible, but I don't feel like money is their. It doesn't strike me as being their main drive. They're more interested in power.
I don't think it's definitely not the main drive.
I'm not convinced that a homosexual is that much bigger a consumer than a straight person, that's something they'd pursue. I think they do it because it's degenerate and evil and destructive to the family, and more because it's because baked into liberalism is this idea that the worse something is, the better it is, like cheering for the underdog. I feel like it might just flow out of the liberal ideology and even they'd spend money to make it happen.
I think that's plausible too. It's at the very least, you can always tie it back to the need for a moral framework that is, needs to be absolutely inclusive.
Yes.
Does that whole paradox of tolerance thing, where, okay, well, if you have moral limits, like what we had with Joe Grant again on that other episode, philosophy in the mass age, his notion of the need for a limit to action, to ethics. Liberalism does not want to have a categorical limit,
right?
Except keep out everyone that does impose a categorical limit, and so I think that's where that at least the moral narrative necessitates that you include this group of people in no matter what.
Yeah, I agree. I don't mean to turn this simple segment about a not gay hockey player into a hot seat, but while we're talking about basics, you hear that politics is downstream of culture, but you also hear the reverse, that culture is downstream of politics. Where do you sit on that one?
I've heard the one way and then I've heard the other way and agree with it. And I don't think anyone really has a solid answer. I've never seen someone completely be able to justify one or the other.
It's probably just a circle. They probably point back at each other. If you can't find a clear answer to that, then it's probably just a cyclical thing.
Yeah, because again, you need to define politics and define culture, and I don't want to get too pedantic or artistic about it. Even you could say okay, well, people come together to form societies, for protection first, for security first, and then X, Y, and Z happen. So you could say that's politics, or that's the foundation of politics. So does that come before culture? But then you can also say, well, just the act of doing that in itself already has culture built in by the nature of the people that are engaging on that. So, I don't know if that's such a cut and dry, something you can give a cut and dry answer to.
I guess here's my follow-up question to that. What's the importance of that question? Why do people bother to say one or the other?
I think a lot of it is to justify their position in, I guess, in like war that they see is going on. And I think it's most likely that was mostly posed by the conservatives and the alt-light type. If so I think who said that? Wasn't it like Bart?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, yeah.
If I remember correctly. So I think a lot of that was, okay, well, I'm a political commentator, so then obviously it serves me to say that, both downstream from politics, or I'm a culture maker, or I'm engaged in this culture war, so it benefits me to say politics is downstream from culture. So for me, that's what it's, this is just like no research done into it, but I just take it as something that people do to justify their own role in the process.
Okay. Well, I'll be the first to say then that meat space is downstream of hyperworld.
See, that's a different one. That's a more interesting point to me.
I don't believe it is. Obviously they influence each other back and forth. I'm being a bit facetious. I just wanted to justify being overly online.
Well, that's a thing. It's more relevant to make that statement, I think, now, because what is politics is downstream, or culture downstream from politics? Like, was that even relevant to any of us where we sit? Like, oh, if politics changes culture, well, what am I supposed to do about that then? Go jump in a political party, go vote? Like, what?
Or become a famous actor?
Yeah. Whereas instead, you actually can engage in the world, or even in the real, depending on where your role lies. So that is definitely more interesting, more relevant to where we are, at least. And I guess you could say doing these actions have a cultural aspect to them. But again, culture is kind of like it's kind of like a fluid thing. You can't really pin it down easily. You can just say, hey, we're in the hyper world, so at least we can say that.
True, yeah. As ill-defined as the hyperworld is, at least we mostly know where it starts and ends. Oh, by the way, I heard the most... Yeah. I'm not sure how much we want to keep talking about the hockey player. I just remembered another interesting thing, though. I saw this YouTube video, and I guess there's a website that people go to when they're suicidal, and it's all about encouraging people to commit suicide.
Yeah.
You ever hear of this?
I have heard of that.
It's...
Yeah, just before we get into that, let's just to finish up on the hockey player.
Yeah, let's do that.
Really, though, the final thing to say on that is just it's an easy thing you can do to hold up the paradox or the contradictions of a system that claims to be open to all religions and all faiths and all beliefs, because the underlying assumption is that you can have this neutral space where all these different groups can come together and keep themselves without pressure or oppression from the state, but that's clearly not the case. Even if the state doing the oppression directly, the cultural environment or the media environment puts the pressure on you no matter who you are. And if you stand against taboos, and this is funny because this case wasn't even someone standing against it. It was like the bake the cake thing. Well, I just refuse to participate in something that misaligns with my
Right.
fundamental values. Like I can't break these. If I'm true to my religion, I literally cannot break this value. I cannot engage in active support of this thing. So, but you're forced, we expect you to engage in active support of their sacred cows.
Yeah, let's not forget they do that. We'll never forget the bake the cake, and we'll never forget this whenever someday they complain that we're forcing them to do something.
Yeah, so I'll just premise on a lie, right?
Yeah. Okay, well, I actually thought of a third topic if you wanted to hear about this tactic I came across. It's old, it's from 2017, but it's called the butterfly war. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of that.
Is it, I mean, I don't, is it like the butterfly effect?
No.
Or is it something
It's completely different. And I found it quite interesting. It's techno strategy, but like very advanced. But first, let's talk about this suicide website. I just found out it exists and that it has claimed at least 4 lives that we know of. But they're using it to try and shoehorn in stricter internet speech laws in Britain. Now, some of the laws proposed seem perfectly reasonable to me. Like, you can be held culpable for really encouraging someone, for assisting someone in suicide. So if you give someone the instructions of how to get the materials and whatever, then you could be.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I think it's already against the law to be complicit in a murder, anyways.
Or a crime, yeah. True.
Yeah.
That much is that far. But then, of course, they're gonna. I don't like these literal psychopaths, nihilistic pieces of shit, hiding behind freedom of speech, and I would brush aside their freedom of speech in order to do whatever justifiable punishment, right? But at the same time, I hate the lawmakers, and I don't trust them not to just use this as some horrible excuse to clamp down on, say, now if Manslow goes online and tells some transsexual to KYS, he shouldn't, it's just an insult, or it could go so far, it could go too far so easily.
Yeah, well, if this is in Britain specifically that they're describing these laws, they're already past point of no return. Anyways,
good point.
But didn't they jail or at least fine some girl for posting lyrics? Do you remember that story?
Yeah, and it recently came up again too. There's a viral TikTok video that mentioned it just this week.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
they're pretty bad in that regard. Anyways, but that being said, you do have, again, these people are psychopaths. You're trying to convince someone to commit suicide.
Well, yeah, and convince them not to talk to their family and stuff like that.
Right. But, if this was consistent, if the lawmaking was consistent, you would shut down these grooming servers for, transgenders, and or even the places where they groom children for pedophilia. You would do. There's a lot of things you could do with these sorts of happenings, right? And you could be focusing your policy specifically on targeting that, but instead you get some of that, right? And then a lot of it just goes back to these vague definitions of hate speech, and then you post rap lyrics for your dead friend, and then suddenly getting busted by the police. So yeah, it could be really the people making the laws and enforcing have to be just people. They have to have a genuine sense of what is justice.
Yes, I mean they're talking about AI judges now, and I believe AI would be better than some judges, at least more consistent. But that consistency and that blindness is often part of the problem. We can tell the difference between Manslow telling someone to KYS and psychopath on a forum giving people instruction, like telling them to not talk to their family or talk to a therapist or whatever. But the law can't, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's
well, and that's the other thing too. It's like the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law, and a lot of these lawmakers or law enforcers are happy to take the letter of the law and then use it in a way contradictory to the spirit.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of petty
really
bureaucrats do that.
People. You're not really saving people or making society a safer place or correcting someone's moral character by giving them punishments for minor insults. Or even, again, just because it's so easy to use the rap lyrics. Like, who did you actually benefit by doing that? Even if it technically broke the letter of the law, did that really serve the purpose of the law and the spirit? No, obviously not. But you need proper, like, good men enforcing it.
Yeah. Simple enough. I guess there's like no moral conundrum when you think about it. There's only conundrum if you try and boil it down to a set of axioms that won't entrap your friends.
Yeah.
On that note, let's talk about this butterfly war. I found it a very interesting theory. There's this social engineer, and if you don't know, like hacking, the idea of like hacking people socially, social engineering. I think he's in that community, but don't quote me on that. I think his name's also Jack Ryan, but don't quote me on that. He's a very weird guy. Apparently he's been like tricking or like engineering 4chan to do a lot of his bidding since 2012. Another thing he did was buy Milo Yiannopoulos 20,000 Twitter followers, like doubling his follower count when he wasn't very famous in order to get Gamergate more prominent. He's this kind of guy. But I was reading one of his strategies he came up with, and it's called the Butterfly War. And it's based on the idea that butterflies will evolve weird wing patterns because they're trying to look like the butterflies that are poisonous or inedible. And it creates a sort of arms race. So his idea, Google collects metadata, like by how you move your mouse, what you click on, who your friends are, your vocabulary, etc. So his strategy, you mimic the behaviors and social media behaviors until you start seeing ads that are targeted towards, say, black people or another protected class. And then once you do that, you start going and engaging in, well, he said with like the anti-globalists and stuff. You start, he didn't say go make bomb threats or anything, but go do the speech that maybe you'd normally do that they are really trying to crack down on, but do it as a protected class. This would force them to engage in even like more invasive forms of what he calls digital phrenology. And that would put them in this terrible, conundrum where they're breaking civil rights and
catch-22.
Yeah. And I believe he's been carrying this out to some degree since 2017. Like, I think there's a certain amount of people who have done this. I don't know to what effect, but I wanted to bring it up because I find that level of like tactic and digital magic and tricking the system like that, like even if that particular one doesn't work or is dumb or whatever, I like where his head's at. I like that kind of thinking.
That's a good way to look at things for sure, because the internet's so massive and now there's so many people. Like, there's always a fear of, oh, you're being tracked and watched, but they're collecting data on me. But yeah, there's millions of data points for millions of people. No individual person are keeping up with all that. There's way too much to look at it. So they have to rely on systems that streamline the process for them. But then if you interrupt that streamlined process with the way this guy's trying to approach it, it sounds like those are the kinds of tactics, I think, that really limit their capabilities, because that's a whole...
I remember how I came across that older article now. He just invented a new tactic. ChatGPT writes in the style of a liberal MBA, like a 4-year degree graduate. That's the exact style it writes in if you don't give it any further prompts to change his style. So he was showing an example of him rebutting someone, like an argument about SNAP benefits or something like this. And how when he taught, like he'd put his answer through ChatGPT to rebut it into that vocabulary, and the liberals trying to argue him were just like, they had like not a foothold. They didn't know how to cope with someone rebutting their points in their own language, in their own grammar. It was really confusing their signaling systems, right? So I don't know.
A whole other shot. He like just shot your opponents.
Yeah, it would be like if
you obviously. I was going to say, if you come at it from our perspective, in our sphere, we have a particular way of approaching all these things because we've been initiated in this information through a given process that leads us to a particular approach. But suddenly we get that all away, and it's all fed through that lens. That's shocking.
Yes. There's a corollary to this too, and let's pay close attention to this, is that it will make it easier for anybody to mimic our style and come in and talk to us, and we don't want to get confounded in the same way. Of course, a very simple solution is to stick to your principles, and then if someone's like saying based, this is, degenerate behavior, da-da-da-da-da, you can analyze it on the merits of the argument and not the grammar, and deal with him that way, and then would be protected. So make sure you're not being like an NPC and just like falling for virtue signals, basic social signals. Like analyze the content of what people are saying.
Yeah, that's really good, because there's been something we've talked about this, at least before the show. I guess we were talking about this. But there's a lot of people out there that just post things, and they're posting them like they're made in a factory. Like it's like, what would an AI trying to mimic our style sound like? That's like I see a lot of that now. Now, I'm not saying this is them doing that. I am saying it wouldn't.
It wouldn't be very hard.
The person that's agreeing with, it wouldn't. But what I'm saying is, you wouldn't want to be the kind of person that's sounding like that, for one. Not to say that like it should be simple and easily repeatable, but it's about not wanting to sound like someone that's mimicking an edgy, spur online. You want to be someone that has genuine principles, like we were saying. And lots of these posts just sound like if I were trying to be an evil Telegram edge poster, an evil Telegram spark. It sounds like there's lots of these comments popping up where they look like mad-induced through that lens. So something to be on guard for.
Wait,
sure.
I just thought of something. This could be like a modern Doctor Who kind of episode thing. But you know how the AI now, if you try and get it to say anything naughty, it'll give you like this predefined script. And you know how they have like voice faking and stuff? And, people are going to be able to like fake accounts and fake styles very easy. So what if it becomes just a matter of course in the future that to make sure someone's a human when you're talking to them, you make them say the N-word, because AIs can't do that?
Oh, yeah.
It would be like weirdly parallel to how this whole thing started. A lot of the early racism and the alt-right and stuff like that was really just sort of a right-wing virtue signal to show like, oh, I'm not mind broken. I can still say no. I can think for enough for myself to say the naughty words,
I can break the taboos. I got no
Yeah.
problem breaking taboos.
But they'll either have to make AI that can break the taboos, in which case, fun, Tay is back, hooray, or we can make it divide by 0. Error.
And if they can't break the taboos, well, then it's an easy sign there.
Yeah. So this is what I mean when I say the shadow is baked into the machine.
Yeah, it's funny how there's these built-in weaknesses to that whole framework, that whole liberal framework. I think the more we engage with this, the more it seems to me it's going to be really easy just
Okay. We're back.
Sweet. Okay. Well, I think we covered that last topic, so we'll ready to jump in this article from another Randy article.
Yeah. Egg Report, Randy, Garfield Lasagna, and other names.
Yeah. Other names, yeah. So this one's called Nation versus Nurture. And we'll toss a link. I recommend everyone read it.
It's a banger.
Did you have any first impressions on this one before we dive into it?
I love his definition of nature. No, that's diving in.
Uh-huh.
My first impression is good to hear from Randy again. I hadn't read his articles since the last show we did on him, but he's always got an interesting perspective.
Yeah, I think the way he reframes the notion of nature gives us a whole other approach to defining ourselves. I think we can extrapolate a lot into self-definition of modern Canadians, actually. And then there's even some overlap with some of the stuff we've talked about from that parrot with the vapor trad model. So if we take this conception, we'll dive into it, but there is a lot of material here to build a notion of ourselves as, say, the modern settlers and engaging with the savageness of nature, but just reframed for our current context.
Yeah. So what is his definition of nature? It's pretty much everything that civilization is not.
Yeah. So people get this notion of nature as the animals and the trees and like a garden, right? The modern notion is domesticated nature, right? And we don't really have to engage with real nature. We see the shadow of it, but the hallucination.
Mm-hmm.
But nature for him, before modernity, is, he says, you're better translated as something like infinite danger.
Right. So let me make this very clear. There's no such thing as natural food by his definition, unless you found some roots in the forest. If you had a tomato, that would be from civilization. It's an agrarian product that is tended and by man and harvested and all that. So it's part of civilization. It's not nature. Tomato, not nature. Even an organic one. Especially an organic one.
Mm-hmm. The very principle of an organic tomato is like a civilized, cultivated tomato in a way that is almost removed from nature. Like it's gone through the process, industrialized, and then refined so that the dangers of the industrialized process are removed, but it's still within the context of safe cultivation. So it defies his principle of nature as danger.
Right. This is actually very much... Okay, back in the day, I entered a story contest in Vancouver, and it was a story about... I was trying to explain to Vancouverites the Saskatchewan vision of nature and how it was different than theirs. So I wrote a story about how I was driving to work in Saskatchewan along the fields, and these giant, like 20-foot tall, maggot-looking bugs came out of the ground, and they split open, and there was dwarves inside. And I saw, and like these angry, like feral dwarves, and I saw all my neighbors like just fighting these dwarves on the side of the road with like booster cables and tire irons and stuff. And they're just casually doing it, like, oh, hey, Bill, hey, Ted, oh yeah, or whatever. It was, of course, a jokey story, but I was like, how do I explain to the Vancouverites what nature is like? It's hostile to us. It'll like, it'll kill you, whatever. But we're like kind of casual about, like, it's the farmer's notion of it. Like, we can control it, we can beat it.
Yeah, well, like I think he puts it well here in this paragraph. He says, nature is an active force that directly and self-directedly interacts with you in time, with humans in history. It's not a set of disinterested laws. So he's setting this apart from natural law, which obviously is a thing we agree with, but he doesn't mean it in that context. He means it in the context he's outlining here. He says it is an animal, not a machine. Nature is a metaphysical constant, but an active one, an active force that is always and eternally trying to essentially get you. Mm-hmm. So he's talking about that, the uncertainty that it provides. So, pre-modern humans, we're not guaranteed to just be able to sit in the house all day and be comfortable and be warm, not have a dangerous predator break down the door, or not have to worry about what they were eating in this day because of the necessity of them going out to find that food for themselves. And even in a state, a classical era, for example, you still had these pressures all around you, because human nature itself is one of these categories that falls underneath his notion of nature. So the prevalence of wars or violent, aggressive interactions you have with your fellow humans were much more constant. There's many more threats or diseases even. So he's always trying to get you, is what he's pointing at. This is the sort of nature that we're up against in this definition. And you don't want to forget what it looks like. The problem is that when we get, especially into our modern era, into these modern industrialized nations, we lose sight of nature as that danger principle. It's sort of like, oh, I'm just going to go up to the mountains to see nature, but it's not. That's not what we're talking about here. And then he said it starts to creep back in. Nature creeps back in a way that you can't recognize. It digs into the walls. And we keep nature out, but we don't understand, or we have an illusion for what it really is after a long enough time. So he reframes this now as decline. It is what happens when nature gets into polis. This danger that we're encountering now comes in a new form of decadence and decline. Now it's an old form, but the way it manifests currently, where we have eliminated the more concrete understanding that nature is danger, now we have modes of decline and decadence to face.
Yes. So he's saying we're in a state of anarchy right now.
Yeah, it is a sort of state of, I think, what does he say specifically? There's meaningful difference, he says, between total liberalism and total political anarchy. And from that, we have to work out new social orders and small kingdoms forming around border skirmishes and invasions. But obviously, this doesn't look like how it traditionally looked like. I think a lot of what we talk about on the show about sort of claiming space in the hyperworld, for example, and forming these decentralized tribes using devolutionary technology. These are the kind of battles that we have to encounter now in this new form of the battle against nature as infinite danger.
Yeah. It hits home. It hits home. I'd be curious, I guess, now that we've explained the kind of outline of the article, how you think that ties to vapor trad.
Well, I think just what I just said ties to vapor trad. The notion of reforming these small kingdoms as things have broken apart, is the cohesion of nations as they are now in this or post-nation context.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly you are scrambling to build these small kingdoms, as you see here. And this fits in with, we talked about parrots who have these communities in the outlaws of the Islamic State. They're still running, they're still going to operate. It's not going to be a total collapse, I don't think.
No.
But they're just not going to have the relevance to meet the needs of your tribe in your particular context. And
Right.
it's up to you to build those kingdoms on your own. And that's how we do it. The way we do it is through, like we said, this evolutionary technology.
Yeah. Well, so
We scavenge. He says too. We can scavenge the ruins through this process.
right. I guess so. The way I see it, we're in a period then of we're in the very, very, very first part of the digital feudal age, where we're gathering slowly around war chiefs, chieftains, and whatever. But I was kind of commenting, this is we're at the stage of people are, after this legitimacy crisis, where all the institutions have lost so much legitimacy, the people who can't rely on these anymore are banding up in various weird cults, chat groups, etc. Now, I say that's banding around proposed solutions. We have yet to see anyone band up around, like, what happened next in the feudal age is they managed to build forts, and that became the actual. A lot of chieftains got wiped out because they didn't have a fort, or they had to join someone who did, or whatever. So we have yet to see what that next technology is that will actually truly define these digital tribes. And I'm terribly curious about that.
Me too. And I think this is where we can tie it back in. As I was saying at the start, there's some resemblance or some relatives to defining ourselves as Canadians in this current era. Because I would say even we could swap out the notion of as being sort of a feudalism and more of a pioneering or settlers, right?
Oh.
The Canadian settlers were facing nature as we see it, or as we saw it then, as this completely untamed wild land with threats constantly. Then you didn't have any defined structures. You literally had to wipe out all of the Maritimes were just forested over. They had to cut down miles of trees while fighting off the natives, and constant threats from all sides in that regard. And that's a really easy to perceive notion of nature as the danger around you. Mm-hmm. And then they had to build that from scratch. They had to refine a lot of what they were because of the nature of the wild land that they were encountering. So you saw, for example, the French in their early days. It was basically a ragtag group of French people from all across the country, people with different cultures, even different traditions, because French tradition in those times wasn't it was depending on the area that you lived in. You lived in the same area, generation after generation, and suddenly all these people, mostly disinterested in their class, were placed in the world because it's like orphans or poor people, the forgotten child of a large family, all come together from their different locations within France, and then having to sort of scrape together their new lives in new context. And when we frame it within this notion of nature, where nature can be any danger, any decadence, then we can kind of see ourselves as these settlers coming from somewhat disparate background. Now, obviously, we all have a Canadian background, you could say, Canadians, or we're provincially sane, yes. But there's a lot of overlap or a lot of variety of class backgrounds within this too. And all of this is coming together in this context where we see things falling apart, getting more decadent and degenerate, and we have to fight back against the encroaches of, let's say, LGBT stuff, or the anti-white stuff. And that's the nature that we're facing now. And we can kind of frame ourselves as these settlers encountering this new version of the savages around us. Now it's not the pure wild and the Native Americans. Now it is these savage humans that have had nature invest in them, the evil invested within them to disrupt the stability of the civilization.
That's brilliant. And this helps us answer the thesis of our entire program, which we talked about in our first episode. What is the hero of the hyperworld? We can, as a Canadian hero, it will be a pioneer of sort. But also, we then must consider can we have a hero before we have the technology that lets us advance, for the Canadian pioneers, that might have been the canoe or the fort, like the palisade, right? Or right. Any number of settler technologies.
Well, the Voyager needed the birch bark canoe.
Back to
and he needed
the feudal analogy.
The natives to understand how that birch bark canoe came about.
We might not be able to get the hero until we get the castle, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
So,
you could say it could come into being simultaneously too, though.
Yes, I mean the guy who invented the castle would be a hero, or the canoe.
Yeah, or the hero is defined by his goals, and at the moment, it's because this is such an abstract encounter with nature, relative to any other history, any other moment in human history. I guess there need to be a better definition of the goal, because in the past, let's use the example of Voyager, go through the wild lands to find a beaver pelt and bring it back, right? It's then building the birch bark canoe, obviously, and clearing the land and figuring out some diplomacy with the natives, and encountering those are much clearer goals.
Yeah, but
you can bring about all of your tools a lot more easily because the goal is clearer.
Yes. However, once we establish this vocabulary based on this metaphor, it might be almost as clear. It might not be so abstract if we can develop a proper vocabulary for dealing with the internet. When we're attacked, savages is actually just a heuristic that means one of any number of bands of various natives who had quite different customs and stuff from each other, but it doesn't matter. We know that they're savages. So if you're assaulted by an SJW or a black guy or something, we might not have to differentiate. Maybe we could have a word for that. It would be a concept. Maybe carving out a chat group without getting banned. There's a word like that, like settling or whatever. Maybe once we define the actual parameters that we're operating in, it might be almost as clear as day as if we're chopping down trees.
That's very true. It's just getting the roadway down in the first place. You just got to get there. And drawing on this sort of, I guess, colonial framework, and I don't think we're necessarily, again, it's not a one-to-one ratio of, we want to go out and conquer the whole world. But like, let's say the Portuguese in their expansion, like the first 80 years of their search for India, the first 80 years was literally just figuring out how to get around the Horn of Africa. It was 80 years for that. And then it was something like within 20 years, they were in India with their first fort, right?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of, that's sort of the kind of thing you have to take into account, is just, once you figure it out, like once they figure out how to get around the Horn of Africa, once they first made contact with the East Indians in Calicut, then it was, we can just send back and forth, in a cycle once a year. And then it became a whole empire. But that first 80 years was the grind of where's Africa, where's the bottom of Africa to get to India. So that's something to take into account. Work your way through, develop terms, develop tools to mark your way through nature, you could say.
It's funny. People call the internet a gold rush a little bit, although very few people actually manage to make real money at it. So I guess it's just like a gold rush. But there's no optimism about our outside world, but you will find these pockets of real dreamlike optimism about the internet, be it kids who think they're going to be YouTube stars, or Bitcoin guys who think they're going to strike it rich, or do, or
Well, there's money Twitter. There's a whole area of Twitter that's called money Twitter, and it's basically, here's how you drop ship online to make $100,000 a month, and then it's like one guy does that, and then every other guy makes like $500 a month.
Yeah. Yes. Just like a gold rush. They say sell shovels in the gold rush, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's not financial advice. I don't know what a digital shovel is. A computer, I guess. Whatever. Yeah, if you had server space to rent out, you'd be doing fine. That's something to invest in. But of course, everyone is.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we're going to find is not something like when they were going up to the Yukon to mine all that gold, they didn't know that they were stepping over the richest uranium deposit in the world to get there. They were going for by the time they were going for the gold rush, gold was almost obsolete. Like the Spanish had tanked their whole economy by bringing so much back from the New World. In the same way, Bitcoin as a currency is just sort of a simulacrum of an old value. What we're likely to find here is something completely novel that we don't even know is valuable yet.
Yeah, that's the trick, is how do you know when you hit it?
Yeah. Or
maybe we've already hit it, we just don't know.
Right. There's I think the future's wide open, and it'll be funny because the real world will collapse, like all the institutions have. It is collapsing but not in any dramatic way, just in how we know it. Mm-hmm. And it'll be reconstructed in the image of the internet. Like, it'll be whatever it's reconstructed into, the vision of it will happen in hyperworld.
Yes.
It's which is a scary thought for many, and rightfully so. But that's why we have the necessary task of finding the value in it and like enforcing a like better moral code than the old world had.
Yeah, well, that's key. And then, you know, within that, I mean, like, obviously a lot of people are uncertain about that approach, and they're probably not even thinking about the reality that that is, you know, engaging the hyperworld as a new form of civilization construction, you could say. But that's also the same task that our ancestors, the settler ancestors, had. We can conceptualize ourselves as taking up that task, because obviously not everyone was cut out to just jungle the wilderness. It was pure wilderness basically until the early 1900s, even mid 1900s.
Think, consider how novel this is. Okay, in our sci-fi, you know, like you get in your Star Trek ship and you go to some other planet, but the other planet, it has trees and water and space and time, and you know, maybe the aliens have pointy ears. Maybe they have, you know, one thing different about their society. Maybe these are it's a planet of cannibals. Maybe they're like very advanced and they're just like pacifists or something, you know, whatever. But none of the sci-fi ever dreamed you'd go to a planet where time and space are simultaneous and okay, there probably is sci-fi that did this, but you know what I mean. Where time and space are simultaneous, where everyone's next door to each other, where everything is a concept and nothing has physical form. And yet that still matters, like that still people live and die by it, or killed by it, or made by it, or impoverished by it, you know? It's beyond sci-fi. If we went to another planet, it would be a lot more like, you know, normal Earth than the internet is.
Because they don't like it, that's you know, the global village of McLuhan, where, you know, everyone's simultaneously tied into the whole world all at once. Yeah, the capacity that at least I've seen for sci-fi to explore that as a, you know, the real future, is relatively, that's relatively explored in at least those concepts. So it is, you're right, it is very alien to it.
Well, I don't want to rip on sci-fi, because I'll bet if I dug through it, I could find some stories that like really hint at it or hit it or whatever. Because
I don't watch it enough to.
But yeah, certainly nothing on TV.
The thing is whether or not someone has engaged with that, it's not definitely not presence in public consciousness. If
people are excited about going to different planets because the novelty that can unearth. Good pun, I guess. Then they should be extra excited that they live in an age where we have invented a completely conceptual planet beyond our previous imaginations. Now we just have to imagine how to get value out of it.
That's right. Well, I think one of the things, and we're always tapping on this, one of the things that has come out of this, or at least that a concept that we have, back to what we already referenced earlier, is this, you know, more this vapor trad notion of civilization and the need to establish your social organizations locally, neo-tribally, using the tools of the age. And he even said it in this report. He says new social organization will emerge or re-emerge and replace 19th century national identity. It is my hope that these will not be called or recognized as nations for a long time, and that they will be small and plentiful, practically in the shape of localism, high trust, extended family compound situations, with compound being more or less metaphorical. So there's that notion. Exactly what we've been talking about. And again, he even points out metaphorically. So it's not, you know, oftentimes we think, okay, well, you need to build, you know, have all this land to yourself and build up a compound, but there's room in there for having a metaphorical high trust extended family situation with your tribe. And it's going to go unnoticed for a long time because people are going to be tapped into that old notion of nation for long after it's not what people are doing, or at least not what the people that have been on top of the gold rush, as we've been saying, are doing. And I guess that is one of the keys in stepping forward into this.
Yeah, well put. Well, I've been liking these quick episodes. How do you feel about quick episodes? We're keeping them under an hour and a half lately.
Yeah, that's fine by me. When talking to some getting some feedback, at least, I was being told as long as we're talking about something that we can talk about, they're happy to listen. They're listening as long as we're talking. Just hit our marks, and then when we're done, just finish. So I think whatever we do, as long as we feel like we said what we need to say, I think we're all good. So I'm good with that.
Right on. All right. Well, any good stories from the week? No, you said you had a boring week.
Yeah, it's really limited.
I'll give you a Downtown Abbey update then, because I got further into the show. It's a hard show to read because the entire premise of the show is this sort of conservative values being continually assailed by the liberal values. And the interesting thing about it is that it doesn't pick sides as much as you'd expect. I think it's it's definitely, it might lean progressive. You could argue it both ways, but there's two of the main most likable protagonists are deeply conservative and continually complaining that their traditions are being eroded by even their progressive family members and stuff like this. It handles some of the JQ. It handles some shoehorned in homosexuality stuff, and it's a really interesting time capsule, not of that era, but of 2010. I still recommend it, but if you watch it, I'm not saying it's endorsing conservative values. I'm saying at least it has that voice in there.
Mm-hmm. Plays credence to it.
Yeah. I'm hoping that I'm on season 5 of 6 now or something. I'm hoping it doesn't totally be like all the aristocrats and traditions are dead and that's a good thing. I don't think it's heading that way, but I'm hoping it doesn't. If it does, I will unendorse the show, but we'll see.
They sometimes do that in the last season. Just pull a 180 and everything they built.
Oh God, I hope not. Well, as long as Mr. Carson...
at least
what?
At least it's nice that they were able to still build a show with that kind of fairness in it in the 2010s. Feels like you've been this just garbage has happened for so long that the 2010s seems like it was already impossible to make something like that then, even, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's the writing is not perfect. The characters are great. The writing's not perfect. Some of the plot lines could have ended they draw on way too long. Things like this. Mm-hmm. Still pretty good watching. Good winter watching. I think next winter, I only really watch TV in the winter, but then I watch a lot. Next winter, I'm going to do Mad Men. Yeah.
Yeah, I never watched it. Don't know anything about it.
Yeah, I'll let you know if it's worth it. Alrighty. Well, Charles, I'll talk to you next time. Everyone, like, share, subscribe.
Yep.
All right. Have a good night.
See ya.